Welcome to the SwimSwam Breakdown. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges, coming to you today from Columbus, Ohio. More on that in the future. We're joined by Braden Keith, SwimSwam Editor-in-Chief, and Olympic champion Tom Shields from Berkeley, California. What's up, Tom? How's it going?
Tom, who's that on your mug?
Tuesday. G. The one you can. That's G, and then us, and then me.
Are
This
those
one's
fish
cool.
real, or is that Photoshopped?
Yeah. This is where we got, or this is definitely not where we got them. I'm being a bad fisherman, but I like this one better because it's like a pano.
Yeah, that's
beautiful.
cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Dude,
welcome to the
fancy
podcast,
mugs.
Tom.
And we're starting out with an area of expertise for Mr. Shields, the World Cup. It was a shortened series this year, only 3 stops, right? Berlin, Toronto, and Indianapolis. First off, I just want to start with who was your standout swimmer of the series? Obviously, we had Beta Nelson and Dylan Carter as the overall winners on the men's and women's sides. But who really stood out to you over the entire 3-cup series?
Dylan to me. I love that guy. I'm so happy for him. I think he was able to hone in on some that could produce results, and it did. And you rarely see that, especially at the cup level.
Yeah, he was good. He won a lot of races. I think people don't realize how good of a swimmer he is because he's a 50 butterflyer, essentially, that is working
now.
on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this was like a big moment for him to show that he's a great swimmer. Is it lazy to say Katie Ledecky? She broke 2 world records.
Yeah, those records.
I think that people in that caliber, and now I feel comfortable enough to say I can really only put her. But it's like she's done so good in this sport that everyone's like, oh, cool, like whatever, just let her. It's like no one cares, and it's like so frustrating. It's like, no, that's dope. So I like every time she does something, like her specifically, and then a few others throughout history. But right now, her, like I'll always hit her up and be like, hey, that was sick. Because I know that like she's probably getting the least congrats to world record ratios at this point.
Well, the fact
like,
that she almost got one on a split, on an 800-meter split, like I think that's what made it kind of video game times.
Yeah.
I mean, especially because Belmonte broke that, I think, in 2014. Like, it was old.
She was peak.
Yeah.
That was peak Maria.
Yeah. And it's not like, we know that event isn't competed a ton, right? Especially on like the super international stages, but it's like, it's a world record that's been around for nearly a decade. And she just took it down in season.
Okay. So if we eliminate the obvious, Katie Ledecky, Bella Sims, who obviously we all knew was a great swimmer, doing some stupid things in the backstroke races, doing some different races. I mean, if I am a female athlete under the age of 20, I am figuring out how to move to Las Vegas and train for Ron Aiken. I mean, he's just hitting like every time. To use an appropriate analogy, he's like coming up on a full house every time. What's the gambling analogy I'm trying to come up with?
Royal Flush.
Yeah, I mean he's coming up aces every single time.
Just always sevens, right? Or the opposite. I think it's pretty cool to see that in the States. Is she going to move on to a program? I'm unfamiliar with her situation.
Yeah.
She's committed to Florida. She's committed to Florida.
Got it.
Senior in high school, committed to Florida.
You've seen a few like chances, and then I would say like Michael Andrews been the one to kind of like shirk that. Whereas like with Missy or whatever, but like it would be cool to see. It's cool to see that happen with Ron. I think that has been like an undertoned thing that like people can no longer ignore in the U.S. and I love to see that. Like a club team do that.
And I know Ron wants to move on to college. He has indicated many times that he's very interested in the right college job, and who can blame him, right? The money becomes huge if you're a top college coach. The influence becomes huge. You can work with tons and tons of star swimmers, and all that's all great. I think there's still room for a club coach like him. We still have, obviously, Bella Sims. We still have elite athletes that are not at the college level yet, and they need somewhere to be. And, I hope that somebody finds a way to keep him at the club level where he can continue to do this sort of important role. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but like, I think we've undervalued the progression of coaching in this country. And we look a lot at the guy at the top, but we don't look at who gets them there. And I think we should find a way to support people like Ron staying where they've already shown that they're superstars. Carly Ann Fierro, who was Kate Douglas's age group coach until she was 14, moved on to another club. She's turned out tons of national age group record holders that all move on.
Claire Weinstein,
14.
who's now at Sandpipers.
Right. And so let's find a way for it to make sense for her to keep coaching 10 to 13-year-olds because she's figured something out, right?
I completely agree. And I think they're different skill sets. Coach Andy, whose last name is eluding me, at Nova. I mean, I'm an old hat, so I'm going on the old references, but she coached Beard, Pearsall, at a very developmental age. And she's stayed there. To the best of my knowledge, I don't really live in SoCal anymore. And I think that is such an important mission in this country right now. It's keeping developmental coaches that are great at it in developmental spots, because that's where they do well. And when it comes to women, now we're looking at we're back to the stage where half our national team is high schoolers. So don't quote my numbers on that, but you know what I mean? And it's the world record holder in the men's 100 free is 17. We're moving backwards in time, and I think it's time to outwardly admit that. And the coaches, I was going to say the dudes, but because for the most part now that's what it is. The coaches that are really good at moving people, the percentages 18 and forward, exist, and we know them. We know all their names, and they're cool. I've worked with them for 13 years, some of them. But I don't think that's the only thing that matters. And I think that we're done throwing paint at the wall, or that's my goal, and just grinding kids to a pulp and then find the genetic variances and then put them in these universities. I think that system will work because it's been working, but I think that we're getting beat out. Kyle Chalmers, we were Ubering back from Doha because we missed the bus, and it was just him and me, and he we're talking, and then all of a sudden he stops. Do you know that our population is smaller than LA? And I was yes, I do know that. And he's we get almost the same medals. It's yes, no, I'm extremely aware. I repeat this all the time. Actually, that one factoid to USA Swimming, and it's this is not the best way to do this. So I completely agree and applaud that.
I got a shout out for my standouts. This is recency bias, but this morning I was at Carmel Swim Club and they had a couple swimmers do really well. Alex Shackle, third, I think in both butterflies, but I think the 100 and 200. Sophomore in high school. Obviously something is working for her. Her brother Aaron is a senior, Cal commit.
And Carmel's ridiculous, right? Anybody who's been to Carmel, it's as good as any college setup in the country.
It is.
Yeah.
They have a great setup. They have a 50-meter pool. They're getting a new 50-meter pool built and then going to get renovations to the old 50-meter pool. So they will eventually have two pools. Drew Kibler, who did an interview with him that'll go up soon about going back to Carmel and why he really enjoys the culture there, him and Chris Plum's relationship. But, he had some really good swims after moving back from Texas. But then just seeing how Chris Plum, the head coach, runs that program, it's they did a fly set that he ran a fly set this morning with the Shackle siblings. And the majority of it was drills and skills work using all these different, wiffle balls and fins and paddles just to kind of get them into the right place. And then they did I don't know, 1,500 worth of good fly effort. It wasn't a ton. It wasn't throwing paint against the wall and beating kids to a pulp. It was he was really thinking about what he was doing and how he was preparing them for this set.
Well, and we're going to run an article soon about the regression in qualifying times for the Wisconsin High School State Championship meet, which is pretty stunning. And one coach there thinks we're seeing the come down of the Phelps generation. So we're running out of kids who started swimming because of Michael Phelps, and that we have to figure out a new way to engage young people into the sport and encourage them into the sport and get them to stay in the sport if we want to continue to see the absolute insane times that we've seen in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think this is an okay conversation to have. I wish it was bigger news. If we're the NGB or the system that is going to rely on population, then when that population goes down, that should be a huge concern.
Right.
And I think that because that's going to affect fandom 4 years from now. That's going to affect, everything forever. And it's yeah, I think the sport's in open decline, and it's the least talked about news story in the world.
Well, we'll
That's my
open it
opinion.
up soon enough.
Yeah.
Getting back to the Cup, but
Oh, is
kind of
that
in the
where we
same,
started?
kind of in the same vein. You know, it was only 3 stops this season, right?
Mm.
Usually it's like 6 to 8. What did you guys think of this format? Do you think it'll go back to a bigger format? Do you think Fino liked only having 3 stops?
On paper, I didn't think it was going to be enough. But watching it and watching people engage with it, people partially because it was in North America, but people were more engaged with this than they've been in the World Cup in years. And so until the World Cup becomes a real all-star event again, I like this 3-meet format because it's small enough for people to wrap their heads around. You know, when you had the clusters and the cluster scoring and then the meet scoring, the cluster scoring, the series scoring, I think it was just like too much for people to follow, especially when it was just Alia Atkinson winning 80% and Katinka Hozu winning 80% of the women's races between them. And it's just, okay, another Katinka win, another Alia win, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the scam years were fun, though. If you could get involved in the scam.
They were fun for your accountant, right?
I mean, yeah, it's why I was a professional. It was this weird thing that existed in my career. I was very lucky. Like how I would say like the 17 and 18 graduating classes ran into the ISL and just got really lucky with that. I got really lucky in that era. Like I remember I only did 4 meets in 2014 and I think I made more than I don't know the exact, I can't remember the exact numbers, but like because I had sponsor money back then too, towards the cup. So it was pretty dope. Those were the great days. Maria Belmonte, like 2014 was cool. And I'm an old man, you know, so I'm like, oh, that was sick. But no, this is, they basically ran one cluster, right? And I think the 3-day meets definitely make a toll, but then it lets people use them more as like championship qualification phases. And so like if I had a gripe, it would be like, can we go back to 2 days? Because I thought that was cooler as a product. Like, and I mean, I'm an ISL guy, so like the fewer sessions, the better has definitely been my feedback for decades. But I think like, I don't know. Yeah. Last year, like nobody, like even like I swept the flies and like there was no bonuses. No one even knows.
It was like a few Australians hanging out before Worlds because they didn't want to go home, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because they were stuck outside, and then I did them because I was like, well, I want to secure some money here. And I mean, I had some like the 50 flies were just as competitive this year. I couldn't put it together this year, but it seemed like more people were watching, probably because of the vacuum that ISL created.
Do you think after this year they will return to the US? I mean, we hadn't seen the World Cup in Indy or in the US since like 2004. I want to say like long time.
Did they sell a lot of tickets? Coleman doesn't know because he missed it because his flight was delayed.
There was 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah, it didn't look like 2015 Dual, which was like the coolest I've ever seen. Ooey Pooey. And they didn't have that one stand section either. One of the finals nights when I watched one of the replays, it was like, but I don't know. You know, that's just one shot. So who knows?
But if that, I mean, half of Indy is basically Austin or Greensboro or wherever.
That's a good point. And it is one of the bigger meets by definition outside of trials.
Yeah,
sadly.
I mean, I would think that just because of the caliber of athlete that it pulled, they would want to come back to North America because like even Toronto was like a huge meet and got a lot of people. It was kind of like this melding pot.
Americans can commit to it. I think they'll come back.
Yeah,
right. That just seems obvious from a FINA perspective.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it just depends, and I don't know. It just depends on what USA Swimming's extra costs were versus like a pro swim, because I know that they're not a huge fan of like putting money behind what brings foreigners in. They really want to like keep it their dollar to USA promotion pretty high.
Keeping it in Indianapolis, 2024 Olympic trials. I had the chance to talk to USA Swimming CCO Shayna Ferguson about their kind of kickoff that coincided with the World Cup in Indy, what they're doing right now to prepare for this meet that's, less than 2 years, but I think over a year and a half away. One of the bottom line facts that I thought was interesting, it's going to be a 9-day meet, 30,000 seat capacity per session. How do you think they'll have to change their marketing or just their general outlook from trials past to sell out this meet, which is obviously their goal?
I think they're going to have to do. I think in Omaha, they relied upon, especially by 2021, I think they relied upon everybody knows what happens when you come to Omaha. Everybody knows where the parties are going to be. Everybody knows where SwimSwam's going to be, where the Olympians are going to be, where the College World Series crowd is going to be, where they can go drink with baseball guys. I think in Indy, they're going to have to do more work to explain what your week is going to look like outside of the swim meet, because the swim meet is great, but especially as it stretches longer and longer, I think there's a limit to the amount. People aren't just going to go to the swim meet and go home. And I think in Indy, it's not going to be as obvious, partially because it's new, but like where the rest of the party is. And USA Swimming has to be a little careful with that, right? Because 90% of their revenue comes from children. And so they have to be careful in terms of marketing alcohol and those kind of things. But I think they need to come up with a way to create like a village that's not the big sponsor-based Splash Zone. I'm not talking Splash Zone, which was weird in 2021, but COVID and stuff. But they're gonna have to, if they can come up with some kind of like a swim zone, like a couple of blocks where all the bars and restaurants are gonna be ready and willing to take all the swimming people, I think that would be huge to getting that many people in the seats.
I love that perspective. I think that I don't know, I don't have no seats, but like whenever I think about like swimming fandom for myself, usually it's like men's NCs, right? As I work with these guys all the time, I really want to go support them. And it's like, I can't go on Thursday. I can't give 3 days to this. And it's like something I'm extremely invested in.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. So it's like, whenever I think about trials as a fan, I'm just like, so you have millions of dollars because you can take a week off, you can travel to the city, you can pay the absurd amount of money, like the amount of the actual type of person that they're trying to say, hey, you're going to come every night and you're going to do this beer garden that we may or may not set up. It's just like, oh, that's such a ridiculously small amount of people. Sorry, that's where my mind went.
But they do get 18,000 to Omaha. So they, that's not 30.
Well, yeah, but like how many of them are like, oh, little Jimmy qualified by 0.1. We want to go.
So more qualified.
I mean, you're not convincing me that that's not the majority of the crowd. And that's why the trials cuts are so slow. Compared to like some of the other sports, our trials cuts are so slow.
Yeah.
And I think it's just to pump up these numbers, man. I don't know. It's just always been my
I mean, it makes sense. I will say one thing in their favor is that I guess kind of similar to Omaha, because it's at Lucas Oil and not at IUPUI, it's like right downtown, right? I mean, the stadium is in walking distance to that downtown bar area where they can set up a couple blocks or hopefully at least get a few bars where it's like, hey, this is where swimmers go.
Yeah, but they can't let the swimmers know that because the swimmers don't want to go where the fans are, right, Tom?
Well, or this is where swim people go.
I think I partied one night in 16. I can't remember where we went. I think I saw you guys. Like I've always been around. Yeah. And then 21, I'm too old for that stuff.
Yeah, 21, you were old.
I was gonna say in 21, I think it was different because of COVID, but it was not.
There was still that one party place that it kind of ravey dance club. I don't remember what it was called, but it wasn't like it was before.
12 to me was like the pinnacle of that. Because like it was this first time you guys put the banner up.
Yeah.
And it was like everybody was in one spot. That was fun.
Yeah.
It hasn't felt like that since, at least the trials.
It can be hard to recreate the magic of the first one. And
USA
I think that's why it's good that they
bring
moved
back
on.
12 vibes.
Yeah.
Well, I also think like 34 million people watched the 400 IM. Like, there's that too, right? Like it's just like I've been saying, like since 2012, it's been a little like this year at ITT trials. Sorry, I was like sitting around and being like, "Do you feel like we're like you go to a house party at like 9 or 10, and then you just kind of like keep going, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, oh man, everyone went to the bar. Like, shoot, I should probably catch up." That's what the sport feels like to me. Sorry,
that's great.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. We talked about World Cup. We talked about trials. Let's talk about college meets. The UT UVA meet, which was billed as a bigger spectacle meet than most college dual meets, was. I was at the Friday PM session. It was pretty cool. It was a little ISL-ish. They had flashing lights. They were announcing everyone's names. They obviously didn't have the big LED boards where you could walk out beforehand. They did hundreds of stroke, 100 IM, mixed foreigner free relay. It was fast paced. It was fun. There was some good energy. So moving forward, and I know we talk about this on this show a lot, but what should college teams pull from ISL to make their dual meets, bigger, better, and more exciting and fan friendly?
I think there are three really obvious things that every team in the country can do without a problem. DJ, because there's 17 million DJs in the United States of America right now. A good announcer. It can be a parent. It can be there. You've got somebody who can do that announcing. When I used to coach in Texas at our state meet, we didn't have it one year, and the next year I asked a dad to do it. He was like, "Yeah, no experience," and he did a great job. So you have somebody that can do that. And three, the pace of the meet. And I know the coaches, protect the athletes, protect the training, the goals, whatever. You always talk about you don't have any real goals for a dual meet anyway. So I don't think we should pretend giving them more breaks somehow protects that goal. So the pace of the meet, and if you want people in those stands, you've got to have pace to your meet. It's got to keep moving. You got to give them something to watch.
Yeah, I love all that. I think my only addition to this whole competition would be I'm just thankful. I said this during season 2 privately, that ISL, success or failure, a lot of problems, especially around marketing. They admit that themselves. I would say, proved that point, that there is something that we can be doing. Some stuff that ISL did was better. And we can swim fast way more frequently and way more back-to-back than people think.
Right. Because your average spectator,
you're not as good.
Yeah.
You're just not overall as good.
Right. The better swimmers had less trouble with it, right?
Exactly.
the better swimmers just defined not the best breaststrokers, the best whatever, but the better swimmers could do it.
Yes. And in defensive USA swimming, why these short course specialists, in short course worlds, and I think I'm a good use case for them. We convinced this guy to 2 little relays, but I helped out the team. You know what I mean? I did a job, and they convinced me to go do long course, and I was able to. And the long course, the better overall swimmers can do both, can figure it out. So they just want to take care of the better overall swimmers, and they literally say that.
And if your stated goal is to get more butts in the seats, the extra butts, you'll get some butts from the local club teams, but most of those extra butts are going to be people who don't know the difference between a 132.4 200 free and a 132.9 200 free. So don't stress about that. Don't if the pace costs your swimmers half a second in a 200 free, don't sweat it if your goal is to get butts in the stands.
Yeah, and I think the one good swim mythology, I mean, Phelps himself kind of ruined that, I would say, just over an 8-day meet. So his doubles were, but if you actually map through why people are obsessed with that, it's you go 4 a.m. in the afternoon, then in the morning, and then the relay, and then the 200 free that afternoon. There's the only race he ever loses the entire. So he wins every single race from that point forward. He got out touched in prelims by Mike Tree. You know what I mean? You can tell that story over and over. And what's cool is you see this guy losing weight, his skin's redder towards the end of the week. He looks sunken in. He's getting back on the blocks. You can tell that story within 2 hours. And I think that's what the ISL was able to do with skins. Oh, look at this dude. Look how tough he is. That's what American fandom, you watch football games. Oh, look at this. JJ Watt died on Wednesday. Or what? I don't watch football, but I saw something on Twitter where that's what, unfortunately, we're gladiatorial fans. That's what we want to see. So the one good swim, we're oh, he really pieced that one together. He took 10 strokes and then 10 strokes and then 10 strokes. And then, he broke a record. No one cares. Right. And I think that's what KG knew. And that's where the genius of ISL or this type of swimming, that's where I think the fandom can come from.
Agreed. Sorry. I mean, if you go fast pace, if you play to the fans too, right? It's the Texas filled seats because they marketed it well, but then no one was concerned about the times. But every time someone from Texas won, everyone was just ah!
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
the only highlight from that whole meet I saw was Texas dude won and then sat on the lane line, like beat his chest and like played to the crowd. And like as a swimmer, I'm just like, all right, dude, come on. But then as a fan, I'm like, oh, that's probably better.
Yeah.
Like it's probably better that that's the case. And it's like probably how like old hat MLB guys feel about like, you know, they're pulling out they're pulling out the Gatorade every single game now. But it's like, well, if it's what the people want.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need to get over that in swimming a little bit. We've got a little of that country club rules of decorum mentality we need to abandon.
Absolutely. And I am like the worst committer of that sin. Like I've celebrated one time in 14. And since then, like my whole goal if I win is like, don't show that it matters to you. Just be like, oh yeah, whatever.
Act like
and like use that to kind of like twist the knife even more into my competitor. And it's like, dude, just celebrate.
Yeah.
I could never bring myself to do it.
Yeah. I mean, we saw
a celebration.
I'm willing to admit I'm wrong here.
We should do a celebration to celebrate the end of Tom's first appearance on the SwimSwam Breakdown.
Yeah.
Oh, it's coming. That's our major news for the week. So let's get down to it. Let's play some sink or swim. First up today on Sink or Swim, Leon Marchand is undefeated this college season. He's gone 10 for 10 in individual races. Will he finish the season undefeated as well?
He's got to go through us. So I by definition, I need to say no.
By us, you mean Cal.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, it's hard to say.
So
they've got very honed in on. Like they're trying to build this. I will say I'm not a fan of. They're trying to build like unsuited dual meet national records.
Yeah,
that's a bit much.
I like
really honed in on it,
records.
and like
I don't care about
exactly. Exactly. And I think that like that's what I mean. If like, oh, the sun was in my eyes this much, or I squatted this much. It's like, how much are we going to pretend? Like you touch the wall first in March or you don't. And I mean that's a very Cal perspective. So I will gladly step on that sword. Or rake. But yeah, I mean, he has a great shot if that's what he wants to do because he's good enough. Like, dude's unreal talent. I guess swim because he probably wants to do
it. Which is not how you started, but that's okay. We love a change of heart here on.
Now I know the format. Sorry, they did explain this to me beforehand, and
you're good. You're good.
It's a complicated format, folks. You sink it or you swim it. Okay, so here's who they have left. They have the Wolfpack invite, that's NC State. They have Stanford at home. They have Cal at home, and they have Arizona at home. Does Cal have a 200 breaststroker? They have Reese, and they have Liam Bell. Does Cal have an IMer? Who's Cal's IMer?
Dusty, Gabe, if he wants to develop it.
Yeah,
probably Dusty.
Yeah. But they don't have somebody that's going to challenge Leon in January.
I mean, Destin did go 138-2 at NC's, but
yeah, exactly.
But yes, I don't think he's.
We're talking about January 25th.
Yeah. NC State, that's a shave and taper meet. Does NC State have an IM or a 200 breaststroker? No. Stanford has a 200 breaststroker.
Glaring holes.
Yeah. Stanford has a 200 breaststroker. I think, to me, if they choose to pursue this as a goal, he will achieve it. Right? Like, I think everybody they're racing has enough holes in their lineup.
Wait a second. So Braden gets all the time in the world to say the same exact thing I said? Because he's good enough. If he wants to do it, he can do it.
Correct.
Okay.
But I went through who he's got to beat. So, like, to me, if he chooses his races based on his opponent's holes, he'll do it. So, but I don't think that's Bowman's style. I feel like Bowman's going to put him in like 100 free just to watch him lose against Cal. So I'm going to sink it.
Bowman doesn't seem to do the old, like Frank did this once. I think Salo did it too, where they come in, especially when like they love to like, this is like before I was even at Cal, they'll come in, like suit up, not even exhibition, and just smash. Like Bowman doesn't really do that kind of stuff. I mean, from what I can see at least.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't.
Eddie does. Eddie asked for suits for the men last weekend, which I was surprised by.
Yeah, but like he asked, and then like both men's team did it.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that like ever since I met him in 2012 and like we worked on what became the Step Over Start a duel in the pool in 2013, December 2012. Yeah. December 13. And like everyone's always like, oh, he's traditional. He does the same stuff. Like that's what other people say. But every time I've worked with him, he's like so open to like change. And I remember like 2014, 2015, McBroom was saying like, oh yeah, like Eddie used to think that like the jammers was all in their head, but like now we're using them in practice and like da 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 da. And like every time like you actually hear something Eddie says, he's so down to do like the next thing.
Right.
So I think that's like an interesting paradigm for him. I know this is king or to sting it. I just put that together, by the way. And we're not doing that at all. And I'm sorry, but we're just talking.
I mean, I feel like hopefully the days of like, oh, surprise, we're suited, like showing up to a dual meet and like not telling the other team you're suited are over. Like I've heard about that happening a decade ago, but I haven't heard about that happening anytime recently.
That happened in 2009 to us. I wasn't here, but I mean, I've heard that like the big suits.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, by the way.
Oh, by the way, we're gonna break world records.
Suits. Yeah.
And I saw Sonny just posted a video about it, like big suiting for dual meets or not. I only watched the first couple minutes.
What does he know about dual meets?
Yeah, and like I think it's just an economic issue, right? Like I don't think that like if I were to really sit down, Dave, and like really hone in on this question, which I just don't do, I think his answer would be like, look, I just can't fund like 30 dudes suiting up every 2 weeks.
Well, that's why like Mizzou did this a couple years ago, right? Like when Andy Grievers was like, we're going to suit for every dual meet. Like everyone who duels us, you can suit if you want to, you cannot suit, but like, that's what we're going to do. And people were like, oh, it's so expensive. And it's like, well, if they can afford it, then like, it's not like they're using new suits every single meet. Like they probably have like one suit for dual meets and then they'll wear it like the whole season or something. But it's just like, if they want to do it, I don't see the problem. Like I get that it's expensive, but if you can, if you have the resources, then like, what's the problem? I'm swimming it. I think Leon's going undefeated. He went 142 and 152 in the 2 IM and 2 breast. I just think he's on another level this season. And I think anything they put him in, he's going to perform. He went 46 and 100 IM. Like, come on. He can do anything. So I don't think anyone, Cal, Stanford, NC State, anyone at that invite, I don't think anyone's going to beat him in those events. And I think if he gets thrown into like 100 back or a 200 back or 100 free, I think he'll rise to the occasion and touch out someone in a dual meet.
Or if Bjorn gets thrown into the 400 AM.
Exactly.
Yeah, we screw around sometimes.
Yeah, we noticed that 500 free
seriously
was ugly.
That was awesome. Okay, next up. Another undefeated streak. Kyle Chalmers is now 7-for-7 in his last 7 short course meter, 100 freestyles. Will he get win number 8 on his home turf in Melbourne at Short Course Worlds?
I think he's got more because the ISL. We're not counting the ISL day 2s.
He just said that this is his he's won his last 7.
He won 4 World Cups last year, and then these 3. I think that's what he's referencing.
Well,
I saw the 100 fly last year too, and no one noticed. Yeah, I think he will. I mean, I'm going to swim that easy. I think he is an incredible guy. His turns are even better. So if he really wants to string it together, yeah, it's his.
His turns are better than his personality.
That's not what I meant. His turns are even better than last year, is what I meant. From what I can see.
I'm going to swim it. Until we see Popovich show up against when I say the big guys, I mean the literal big guys and do it. I still think there's something to the whole thing we saw at the World Championships with him sitting in people's wake and that being a problem because he's a smaller guy. So I think until we see that, him sort of get over that hurdle, I think head to head, I'd still take Chalmers. So swim.
Yeah, I think this is an easy swim, especially because Popovich is not as proven in short course and Chalmers is the world record holder. So he's pretty proven in that event. Yeah, and I think Popovich is pretty much the only one that can challenge him there. I don't think anyone else is on the same level. Chalmers just has that event dialed in.
I mean, I all respect to Popovich, but yes, I think no one can beat Chalmers, but I think Maressi will beat Popovich. Whether that's a term of focus or like a focus issue for Popovich or a skill issue, I just don't think he's number 2, clearly short course, because he's not.
Interesting. 'Cause he's not.
Like, I don't mean any offense to him. He's a great kid. We met him last year at Kazan, and he's like, I could tell last year because like Chalmers and I literally were talking. He comes up and he just starts asking questions, and he's like not afraid. And like when you see a teenager do that, you're like, okay, this guy can like, because there's a lot of problems in like confidence, or like I wouldn't call it necessarily social issues, but like weirdness that people can feel coming to the world stage. That if you can just eliminate that, like coming in because of like a confidence or ego boost, then yeah, that guy could pop off. And so you could just tell like, oh yeah, this guy's gonna be really good. Just talking to him. So like, I have nothing against
That makes
him.
sense.
Just like, yeah, you're not number 2 until you're number 2. Like,
I think he'll be number 2 after Melbourne.
yeah.
Next up, Cody Simpson. Speaking of Kyle Chalmers, Cody Simpson is up for the Australia GQ Athlete of the Year award, which our commenters have lots of thoughts on. So my question is, our swim fans too salty about this nomination for Cody Simpson?
Swim, they are way too salty. It's GQ, right? Like, it's not Sports Illustrated. It's not the top athletic performer. GQ is a lifestyle brand. And I mean, this is like Justin Bieber making the Canadian Commonwealth Games team, or showing up at the World Championships for Canada. Like, this is a huge deal, and there has to be a space for somebody who kind of cuts across industries like this in a really impressive way to win awards. Like, he's not the greatest pop singer ever, right? He's not the greatest swimmer ever, but he is the greatest swimmer pop singer ever. And where else does that fit if not GQ magazine?
Yeah, I agree. I say this all the time. Like, do we work? Like, does you touching the wall more quickly than someone else bring value in and of itself? Or do we work in entertainment? We work in entertainment,
right?
And we're really inefficient. We produce about 8 good hours every 4 years. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And like, it's like that I pass butter moment in Rick and Morty, when like swimmers or swim fans see that something like this happen. And it's like, oh, I'm just doing all this toiling away, and it doesn't like, and this person can do this and it brings in way more. It's like, yes, that's true.
Yes.
There's no point to what we do. Like, and like, they're willing to see it with like the U.S. women's national soccer team, but they're not willing to see it with swimming. And that's sexist. It's like, yeah, great for Cody. Like, he can do whatever he wants. I'm probably going to root for the people I know and I'm closer to. No offense to him, because I don't know. I've never met him. If I did meet him and I liked him, I'd root for him. That's how I work in the swimming world. He seems like a good dude, and he deserves this award. I don't see that, like, it's the amount of attention you can get on yourself for what you're doing. And like, who cares what your best time is? That's one thing that I learned in my career, because my best time's not that good. And I was able to be on a cereal box, and I was like, oh, wait, don't think about that. Just like, thank you. Like, I don't know. I never got that. Like, a lot of people were mad about that with me. And so that's why I feel sympathetic, I guess. It's like, hey, he's out here growing swimming, like in a country where it's important to do that, because it's the one Western, super far East country that swimming has primacy in, right? Like,
yeah,
all these other countries, like, we would love someone like that in the United States. Like,
yeah,
but they don't want to swim because swimming's not a cultural phenomenon here. And that's why we're not as big of a deal.
Hey, Tom, did you ever just go like hang out in the cereal aisle and hope somebody would ask if that was you on the box?
No, I actually did the opposite. I refused to go to around that, because I just like, dude, it's so hard on a phone call being like, yeah, I'm going to make the Olympic team, knowing it's going to be a touch between me and my teammate. Like, I don't know.
Oh, because you're on the box before
exactly.
tries. Yeah.
So I didn't want to think about that at all. Like, I never really let that in. Like, I took the line of like cognitive dissonance. Or I'm going to say this stuff to this agent and to these people, and like do these photo shoots and travel and do all this cool stuff, and then come home and be like, I don't know, I might make it. Cause like, I had to have that like emotional balance around trials. I think that's like, you look at guys like, I think Gunnar embodies this too, where like, you have to make it like the most important thing and like really attack it. And I think that like, at least outwardly, like, that's your Nathans and your Murphs, like the guys who can like hack a lot of pressure. And I love those guys, and I don't know how they deal with it internally. But whereas like Gunnar and I put out like, I don't know, and like that kind of like helped us care less, so we could execute better. And that was my like mental game moving forward. So yeah, I didn't really let that infect my brain. And so I just wouldn't go to the grocery store. I wouldn't go down the aisles. I would just be like, all right, you go in, I'll stay in the car. Cause just so I don't have to see it.
What if you had been single though?
I mean, dude, there's delivery. We do delivery like half the time. Like it wasn't that long ago.
I think that's a great mindset to embody. I hated swimmers that I swam against who would do that behind the blocks. Who'd be like, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm not even going to swim fast." And then they would kick your butt. And just be like, "I guess God, you're a douche."
Lochte was like the king of that. He would like come into like world championship finals.
Not surprised
He's like not even on a double, and he'd be like, "Oh, dude, I'm dead. Like, you got to get my back on this one." And then he would go like 44.6 in the 100 free from a swing. And short course is the ones that I would be on him with. And I'd be like, dude, that's insane.
But Tom, he didn't taper for 8 years. Remember, they were waiting for the intergalactic championships, which were delayed by COVID. So,
hey, man, in response to that, I always say this when people are like, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And then they did this, or like, oh, the sun was in his eyes this much. I always say that about training. It's like everything anyone's ever done in our sport makes sense once you actually know what they've been doing. The past 5 days, the past 5 weeks, the past 5 months. Now, what they do might be better than you can ever do, but it always makes sense.
So speaking of Lochte, our next topic is the fans voted. The people have been heard. Ryan Lochte is Michael Phelps' number one rival ever. I'm curious, after Ryan Lochte, who do you see as Phelps' biggest rival?
It's Cabbage, and it's not even close to me. Like, I think Cabbage is his number one rival. When people talk Phelps and Lochte, I hear like Phelps and Lochte. I hear kind of like a big brother, little brother discussion. When people talk Phelps and Cabbage, it's like those guys hated each other. Those guys are still talking. Like that to me felt like a true sports rivalry. Lochte and Phelps competed for a lot of things. And so in that sense, it's a rivalry, but it never felt like Phelps Cabbage.
Yeah, I would say even Lochte never felt like that, at least in our country. I felt like Lochte was just kind of like, that was one, like he did a really good job in 12. Our media lambasted him. And then
the Phelps face.
And then it went away for 4 years because they never raised because Phelps was suspended. And then like across the pond from each other, they kind of went at each other. But I don't know, maybe it's because I was like active, so I wasn't really like paying attention to it. Whereas like I think a lot of the older ones like PVH, Cabbage, or Australian
Thorpe.
Spacesuit guy. That's sorry. I know him. I looked up to him forever. Sorry, yeah, Thorpe. Like I think those ones, like at least because that's when my fandom existed in the sport. You speak out to me way more, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm going with Tom Shields.
The one time.
And it's not even, dude, the 2014 was such an epic moment. It was so epic. I mean, because to me, you were the only guy in our country who could push him during his comeback. And that was a really cool time because you really didn't know. It was like, is it going to be Tom? Is it going to be Michael? And there were some really exciting races out of that.
Thank you. I think that was fun. I don't think we were rivals.
I don't either.
Yeah.
To me,
I think it was more like I was I was already 25. So like when I look at that period of all of our careers, like my generations, me, Tim, Jimmy, like all these guys who like kind of failed to carry the torch. And I don't mean to speak for them. We all had great careers, but I can speak for myself and our part of a generation where it's like, we watched Phelps and Grievers and Pearsall and Lochte, like these guys born in the 80s, Tony, all the way through Nathan. I mean, you could group Nathan in with us if you really want to. And he carried the torch. But like by and large, our generation, we didn't break an overall record in these 2As from the time Suits came in till the last night of my senior year. And that's like the 4-year period, right? As I was the Suits band until 2013. That's my generation. And then the generation after us, I mean, like Murph walks on deck the day I leave, right? In terms of our ages. That generation like took off running again. And like they are the ones who are the 2016 team. Like you look at the 2012 team, it's Jaeger and Fegan. Like no one else is an NC2A guy Like we're a bunch of screw ups, like in terms of like the international legacy. And that's how I felt about it. And so like that from like 2013, like Vlad, Cortez, I tied Phelps's record. I didn't get to break anything, but we finally broke like some overall records or tied them. And then moving through like 2014, where it's like, oh, Phelps is coming back. Like it's not really our time yet. And then like I was able to like pop one off, and then he just smashed my face through the gutter like 50 times in a row. It's like it was very cool to have that one moment to be like, hey, we existed. This like generate because like the 1984, 1985 born era, that's Pearsall, Lochte, Phelps, Grievers, like that class, like the 1985 class is like the best in history of the United States on the men's side. And so like being 6 years behind them, it was very hard not to be like mentally small. So for me, it was just like this one moment. It's like I swam. Like that's what that was for me.
Because you guys were already good by the time they finished college, right? Like you're not the Phelps generation per se, because by the time they were 21, 22, entering their primes, you guys were already fast. Like Tom Shields was already a very
with
good
zero A-team appearances because of Crocker. Sorry, that's the other one I was forgetting. Thank you. Because Croc and Phelps like dominant, like they were. I mean, you look at like from 2004 till now, it's been 5 guys to represent the 100 fly in the United States. But you take like, and 3 of them are considered good. When that's like what I used to tell like the numbers. Like me and Tyler are like, hey, yeah. But we went, and but like you look at like Phelps and Crocker are like 60% of that representation. Like that generation, and like who built the sport. Like it wasn't not us; it was the generation before us. And like we can't really talk about swimming in that era without talking about that paradigm.
I don't even know if there's a real rivalry in swimming.
No. But I talk about to this day just because like the 2012 Olympics was so successful. That's where the World Cup funding came from. And so I've always known, because I did the World Cups in 13 and 14, and that's what paved my way to landing like a bigger arena contract or Kellogg's contract that let me financially, because I'm not one of these subsidized guys. And like, I'll pop off on that now a lot more than when I was younger, but like half the team is their parents buying them an Olympic experience. You know what I mean? That wasn't my path. So like the World Cups is how I did it. And the World Cups got an increase in funding because of one dude. So it's like, are we a sport or are we a person? And I think the answer is so obviously we're a person. You know what I mean? Like you see these sports that are able to transcend and grow and still have commercial viability past their like progenitor persons.
Past their Michael Jordan, past their Tom Brady, past their LeBron James.
Yeah. And you see smaller sports like surfing. They found their way. No one's going to be on like the #1 TV show or date Pamela Anderson again. But those guys are making tons of money, and they're huge where they come from. And it's a sport that found its way forward. We haven't found our way forward.
Right. And those kind of X Games sports, skateboarding is a great example. Skateboarders are commercially miles ahead of swimmers. And Tony Hawk was the guy. Tony Hawk was the Michael Phelps. And Tony Hawk is still making commercials and making money, but so is everybody else.
Yeah. And that's something that I have not seen any evidence of. And that's why I went all into ISL. Like, obviously, I still have hopes personally. I know probably I'm the last person. But,
after today's news, it's
yeah. And but I think we had to try something, because it's like, I'm not going to win 9 gold medals.
Yeah.
Like I can look in the mirror and be like, hey, I'm probably not good enough. So, like that's a pretty easy conversation. So like, what are we going to do? And like, oh, okay, so like honestly, if I was really trying to do the best I could as a USA Swimming staff member to ensure that trials would do well, all I would do is I would fly to Gainesville and make sure that dude's ready.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Speaking of trials, this is our last, it's not even a sink or swim, but last little cherry on top for this breakdown. Someone wanted a way too early Olympic trials prediction. So I want your way too early. What's one upset that you see happening at the 2024 Olympic trials? One prediction you got for me.
Can we cut this for a minute, because I got to think?
Yeah.
We'll cut out the dead space.
Yeah.
I did not prepare an answer for this. Coleman, give me some names.
And you want
to think of like who's deep enough. Oh, I've got one.
Okay.
Do you have one, Tom? Are you ready?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a hot take, and I don't want to put pressure on it, but I do have one.
Okay. I'm going to take Claire Weinstein to win the 200 free over Katie Ledecky, because I think Katie's going to swim it because she's going to want a relay spot, but I think it's going to be to the point where Katie doesn't get a guaranteed spot in finals unless she swims at trials. And I think Claire Weinstein beats her.
That's
All
interesting.
right.
And this is the part where we let talking heads compete for the hottest take.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 2 tiers here. I think Gabe Jett's going to win the 2 fly. Like through and through, 100%. Yeah, I know. And then the hotter take is I think that Cal will maintain both spots in the 2 fly.
Who's the
Not
other?
me. Not me. Well, I mean, Tej is in Mission, but he's an alum. But yeah, I mean, we have Dare too. We have some flyers around.
Yeah. I like that Gabe Jett pick. He's got the bloodline.
He's got momentum,
has
man.
So much talent.
I love that. It's true. No, and he's got the mindset. Like he's a hothead. I love him. But when I first got to Cal, I was like, all right, dude, you can be this loud, but you got to produce. And then he immediately started producing, and I was like, great, cool, continue to be loud.
So Tom Shields is responsible for Gabe.
No. I have done almost nothing to help him. To be honest with you,
you pace him and swim 100 flies next to him while he's doing 200 flies, so you can get.
Dude, I have not done a good fast practice at Cal, like top to bottom. Like I can pop off like a good swim here or there, but I haven't trained like I used to train the entirety of Gabe's career here. It's a problem we're trying to address right now. But no, yeah, Gabe was just, he came in, he like I was saying with Popovich, he's not afraid to come up and like say something. He's not afraid to like believe in himself. He's not afraid to show that outwardly. And that's what you need to be good at this. So he's got it. That's all I meant by that.
Man, well, my prediction was also in the men's 200 fly. I think Thomas Heilman's going to win it.
I
mean, it's a vulnerable event, right? Like that's a good event to pick. Because we have some good guys in it, but we don't have a 152 in it.
It is a good event to have a hot take because you can say almost anything and everyone's like, whoa, dude, what about this guy? Yeah.
It's so
it's
true.
Funny because like it's such a good event for us historically, and then you take one person away and we have no medal. I was very aware of that as I was training for it.
We're working on it. All right. That's our breakdown for the day. Tune in every week right here for your week's news in swimming on the SwimSwam Breakdown.
We got to do our chest thumps, Tom. Do it.
Oh, yeah. I'm sitting on the list.
Yeah. Tom Shields!
I'm a
Breakdown!